Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Ken Leon-Guerrero's Point of View. I'm your host, Ken Leon-Guerrero, and we are looking at the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was the very first community active petition issued in the United States. And this is something very important for those of us here on Guam who are very thankful for our independence. And the reason I say that is because of all the states and territories in the United States, Guam was the only one invaded during World War II. So we as a people know what it's like to lose our independence. But I'm sad to say that we're not the only ones out there that have experienced that in the past, because right now there are 56 countries out there in the world right now that are going through a state of war. And in these 56 countries, there's more than 120,000 deaths as a result. And that's not even counting what's happened in the Ukraine. Full screen. So I would like to start our 4th of July weekend with a little quote from one of my favorite authors, George Orwell, who said, "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf." And of course, we're talking about the men and women of the United States military services, as well as all of our frontline people who spend 24 hours day and night taking care of us. Now, this is very important for us to consider, because as we come up on this Independence Day, there are things out there that we as citizens need to be concerned about. And we have to be concerned enough to really work hard this coming election season, because right now the dogs of war are being turned loose. Just in the last couple of days, Europe went from 30,000, 40,000 people on high alert to more than 300,000 people on high alert. And that affects us here on Guam, because as the rhetoric spreads out there in the rest of the world, we hear all the noises about China making rattling sabers, following North Korea, and talking about using Guam for target practice. It's real enough that we even have the Joint Region Commander talking about it. These are things that affect every single one of us here on Guam. And that's why we have to be thankful for the men and women who are called to public service. Those who are called to public service and stand in front of us in harm's way. We're lucky because we have the Iron Dome that has been tested here on Guam. And I say that it's so important that we choose our leaders here on island carefully, because all we have to look is to see how bad this can be is look at what happened in Hawaii. When Hawaii's congressional leaders wanted to back away from missile defense for their islands. I'm just glad that here on Guam, for the most part, our politicians make sense. At least most of them have been supporting the efforts of those who wear the uniform to keep the rest of us safe. Remember that as you're barbecuing this weekend. But we have a duty to those men and women who wear the uniform. Our duty as citizens is to put together the best government we have for Guam, because those people of our island and those who are stationed here wearing the uniform are counting on us to do our part to make sure that we have a government that they feel proud to defend. And here's how we do it. I'm really excited about this. Oops, hold on. There we go. You can go to the Guam Election Commission and download this form. This form right here has the list of all the candidates that are running for office, all the people that want us to vote for them, that they're raising their hands claiming that they want to stand up and serve the people of Guam. And by serving the people of Guam, supporting those wearing our nation's uniform. It's real easy to get this list. I have this list. And not only that, I'm real excited to share with you a story about why you should do this. Hold on a second. Let me go to the story. My slide got out of sequence here, but I got an email over this weekend, and I am thrilled to death that I got this email, because I got this email from a voter. Now I'm switching hats here. I'm putting on my candidate hat from my community advocate hat. But as a candidate, I was thrilled when a voter sent me an email and sent me a list of 20 questions that this voter wanted me to answer so that he could make an informed decision as to whether or not he was going to vote for me and share the information he got from me with his friends, family, co-workers, center of influence. This was fantastic, and this goes right back to this list that you can get at the Guam Election Commission. Because for years I have been hearing complaints from people who say, why do we vote? It doesn't matter. We only see the same faces over and over again. You know, that's on us. That's on the voters. The reason we see the same faces over and over again is because we keep voting for them. We don't hold them accountable for their record, because if we look back to this year, this election, or this past election, we look back to the 32nd, 33rd, 34th, 35th, and 36th, we have seen without a doubt a group of politicians more concerned about their own pocketbooks, their own safety, than that of our citizens. And it shows, because now we've got 30% of our people living in poverty. Those that are fortunate to have jobs still live in poverty. And that goes back to, we have politicians more concerned about taking care of themselves and their politically well-connected insiders than they are taking care of the people. So what I want to do is I want to encourage everybody to download that list and then start holding politicians accountable for the things they said they were going to do on the campaign trail and compare to what they did. And then also, we've got a lot of new faces. I am so encouraged by how many new faces I am seeing on this list. And we have to hold them accountable, just as voters are holding me accountable. So we have to ask ourselves, why? What should we do? And I can't believe my slides are out of sequence again. Be patient with me. We'll get there. There are 10 questions that we need to ask every candidate. And you can come up with more, but as I am going to be doing this, because I am a candidate myself, but I'm not just a candidate, I'm also a voter. I've already started calling people on this list. And we need to ask a minimum of 10 questions, starting with the accountability question. For those in office, what have you done? For those running for office, what will you do to improve the quality of life for our people? If someone were to ask me that, I could point back to 15 years of community advocacy, standing up for the people of Guam before the legislature, before 3 different administrations, before numerous boards and commissions. But most lately, the thing I'm proudest of is I have been working hard to share with the people of Guam how they can improve their health. Because I recently got serious about my own health. I lost 128 pounds, eliminated about 15 major comorbidities that would have killed me during the time of COVID had I not lost those issues like diabetes. But you see, a lot of these people running for office also have done things because they were moved by a spirit of public service. We have people who've been sports coaches, volunteers at different nonprofit organizations. What people do before they run for office is, especially with the new ones, is more important than what they say they will do when they get in office, because that shows a track record of public service inclination. The next question we should be asking is, what have you done, or what will you do to improve the actions of our government and to make it more transparent for our people? Because politicians, and they like the lack of supervision they get once they get in office, and it shouldn't be that way. We as citizens have a very powerful tool. It's called the Freedom of Information Act, or here on Guam it's called the Sunshine Act. And what this does is it gives us as citizens the ability to request information from politicians, from government officials, government agencies, about what they are doing with the power and authority and the money we gave them control of with our vote. I have probably issued well over 100 Freedom of Information Acts during the 15 years I've been a community advocate. I've learned so many things that have helped me help our people. And this is something that we as voters need to do. We need to do a better job asking those who are in office now what they have done to make the government more accountable and transparent, and for those running for office, what they will do to make our government more accountable and transparent. And then every 2 years, we need to hold them accountable for what they did. Number 3, what have you done to make our government more accountable to the people? And the pandemic is an excellent example, because during this pandemic, we had politicians just basically blow through hundreds of millions of dollars in ways that did not benefit the people of Guam. All you have to do is think back to those long lines of people waiting at sundown in line at the food distribution centers, hoping that they could get to the head of the line before they ran out of food. Look at the long lines of people that were sitting there at Rev and Tax when the Programa Salapi was first announced, the All Rise Act money. So hundreds of millions of dollars have been evaporated. And this government does not want to, is not willing to account for how they spent that money. And the senators, some of them have tried to get the government to account, but the problem is only some of them tried. Most of them didn't. And we need to remember that when we go into the voting booth. Which politician stood up for the people of Guam? Which politician stood up for Adelu? Because I can tell you, without fear of contradiction, over the past 15 years, I've engaged in a number of actions to hold politically well-connected insiders, the government, politicians, and appointees accountable for their actions where I believe they abused or misused the power and trust we gave them as voters. So as a voter, you take this list, you call up all these politicians, and you ask them, what have you done to hold our government accountable? What have you done with the power and trust we gave you with our vote to make sure the people of Guam are being well represented and our needs and concerns are being taken care of? And for the new people, what will you do? And when you get these answers, hold them to it. Number 4, every politician in office today, back in the 32nd, 33rd, 34th, 35th, 36th, all promised that they were going to streamline the government and make it more cost effective, because they couldn't ignore any longer the fact that our economy was slowly collapsing even before COVID hit, even before the governor shut down everything. We saw the government struggling financially. We saw our deficit get as high as $120 million in the last 2 years of the Calvo administration. And now we know that with the exodus of our young and talented people with high skills to the mainland because of the government shutdowns of the economy, we know that a lot of our retirees have liquidated assets and taken the money to the mainland with them. So we know that coming out of this pandemic, we're going to have a much smaller tax base. So we want to know what politicians have done. They have the tools. They've had the tools for years to streamline and make government more efficient, but they haven't done it. So we need to find out what they have done, and we need to hear, more importantly, from the new candidates, what they are going to do. I mean, I have sued the government over the fuel tax increase. I have battled with the government over the property tax increase and with the 5% business privilege tax, because our politicians long ago passed a bill that said no bonds can be issued, no taxes can be increased, no fees can be increased without voter approval in a general election. That's good. That puts control of the government's finances in our hands, the people who pay all those taxes and fees and bond payments. But our existing core politicians are too chicken to eliminate that law because they don't want to be identified when their election comes up as having taken control away from us. So as a group, they all tiptoe around behind our backs with the notwithstanding clause. So we need to hold everybody on this list accountable. What did you do to keep your promise to roll back those excessive business privilege taxes on the incumbents and on the new people? You got their phone numbers, you got their email addresses. Ask them, what are you going to do to reduce the tax burden on the working class people of Guam? Which brings us to number 5. Everybody, including the governor, got into office claiming they were going to diversify the economy. They were going to strengthen the economy. But what we've seen instead was more of the same, and now we saw the destruction of our economy as a result of the actions of Adelup, and we see rampant inflation eating into the buying power, what little buying power we have left. Now, there are things that the government can do and should have done when they had $500 million sitting in the bank, but they didn't, preferring instead to give pay raises to themselves and politically well-connected insiders and then dole out pay raises like chiclets just before the election to selected groups of voters. That doesn't make the quality of life better for the rest of us who aren't in Adelup or close ties to Adelup or in a high-paying government job. And bear in mind, not all government jobs are high-paying. All you have to do is look at the staffing reports, and you will see that, the myth of every job in government in Guam being a golden ticket is not true. Again, here's the list. Call the candidates. And remember, even all the incumbents are candidates at this point. And if they don't take your call, don't respond to your emails, what does that tell you about them as candidates? Just food for thought. So, number 6. What will you do? What will you do if you're a candidate? What have you done if you are a incumbent to make the people of Guam safer? There are many things they could have done. There are many things they should have done. And remember, from Adelup on down, everybody campaigned on they were going to take a bite out of crime. But instead we saw crime dramatically increase to the point where people are buying guns to protect themselves. You walk around in our villages and it looks like everybody on Guam lives in prison now because so many homes have fences, barbed wire, gates, bars on the windows, and you have to ask yourself who the prisoners are. I submit to you that because of the rampant increase in drugs, especially over the last 2 years, but the rise in crime has made us prisoners in our own homes. So we need to ask all those people on this list what you are going to do to make the people of Guam safer. We also need to ask what they are going to do to improve our public health care system. Because as a group, this group of politicians has gutted the public health care lifeboat. And I'm talking about Guam Memorial Hospital. This group of politicians, led by Governor Leon-Guerrero and Tina Muñoz Barnes, gutted the financial stability, what financial stability was left in Guam Memorial Hospital when they passed a bill to make put Guam Regional Medical Center a large campaign supporter. And remember, the head of Guam Regional is also the co-chair of the Leon-Guerrero Tenorio campaign, and they got their money's worth when for a number of years they had control of the Government of Guam Group Health Program until it was ruled illegal by the federal government, and I'm still in the Supreme Court of Guam over my taxpayer action against them. So we have to ask everybody on the list, what are you going to do to strengthen Guam's public health care system? Because as a result of this pandemic, we know we need to strengthen our system. We know we need to take better care of our people because we know this is not the last pandemic that's going to hit this island. Next, what are you going to do, or what have you done to improve our public education system? And you can't throw this all on the Board of Public Education, because public education gets their direction and they get their funding from politicians. Now, the Board of Education sets policy for the education system, but the master plan comes from the legislature in Adelup, and the funding comes from the legislature in Adelup. So again, we need to ask everybody on the list what you're going to do. And here's why. Our children are the #1 export for Guam. We see between 2,500 and 3,000 people graduate from our school system every year, but are they ready to compete in the global economy? Because we don't have much of an economy for them to keep them here on Guam. So we know that half of them are going to leave. They're either going to join the military or they're going to move to the mainland and get jobs there. Are we doing the very best to send our children out into the world to compete? Well, let's ask everybody on the list. What have you done? What are you going to do to make sure that our education system is the strongest it can be? And there's a reason for that. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "Democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education." And I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that it appears to me, based on what limited experience I've had with high school students since I came back to the island 15 years ago, but I'm concerned that so many of our young people don't understand civics. They don't understand government. They don't understand the tools they have at their disposal to make government work for them. And that is a big concern of mine, in addition to making sure they are prepared to go out and compete against children from all over the United States and the world for the limited middle-class job, limited number of middle-class jobs we're seeing here on the island and seeing out there in the world. Number 9, what have you done? Now you got to remember, some of these people in the legislature have been there a long time, as well as Adelu a long time. What have they done to strengthen democracy on Guam? And again, I refer you to the list, because a lot of these people who are in office and are running again, ask them what they did to strengthen democracy here on Guam. Because over the 15 years I have been here on the island, our rights, our freedoms, our democracy have been getting smaller and smaller with each legislature and with each administration. And I have tried working with the legislature. I have tried numerous times to get senators to introduce bills that would make democracy stronger, make our people more powerful, give our people more control over our fate. But I get shut down every time at the legislature. That's why I created the voter initiative process. Rights guaranteed to us as citizens in the Organic Act of Guam, but made very, very difficult in Guam Code Annotated through the tender, loving mercies of politicians who want to minimize the ability of citizens to tell them what to do after they get in office. So, even though I'm running for the legislature, and I hope I do get into the legislature, that hasn't stopped me from doing my duty as a citizen to try to make this island a better place for my children and my soon-to-be grandchildren. That's right, I'm going to be a grandpa, finally. So on that basis, I've spent 15 years working hard to strengthen the tools of democracy for our people, and I can't do it alone. I need your help. That's why we're doing the voter initiative process, because this legislature, contrary to every promise they made to get back into office, didn't do any of the things they committed to do to the Action Pact. They committed to roll back the business privilege tax, fuel tax, 1% or more tax. They committed to a part-time legislature. None of those things happened. So we're going to have to do it ourselves. And that's why I'm doing it through the voter initiative process, so that if I don't make it into the legislature, at least we can do things. And the most important question for you to ask every single one of these candidates: why should I vote for you? Because when you ask them that question, you're going to hear one of two things. You're either going to hear the ramblings of a politician or the words of a public servant. And I added this question because I get asked this question a lot. And every time I get this question, it's like a reset of my public service compass. Because there shouldn't be any money or a lot of money in public service. And I can tell you, as a community advocate, my wife tolerates it because it's cheaper a year than playing golf, and it keeps me out of trouble. But I was born, or I have this sense of duty long before I became a politician, because the citizens of Guam paid for my education. And the education I got here on Guam allowed me to have an incredible career in the mainland. I mean, in the mainland, I was in the consulting industry, and I was at the top of my game over there as a consultant and working with Fortune 5,000 level companies. But the only reason I was able to do that was the taxpayers of Guam paid for my education. And that's why I became a community advocate when I came back to this island, as a way of repaying. But when you ask these people on this list, the few new people I've talked to so far have inspired me when I ask them this question: why should I vote for you? A couple of the incumbents I will be surprised if very many of the incumbents take my calls or my emails, because for the most of this year, most of the incumbents do not respond to my phone calls or emails. But I'll be interested to see what they do coming up on this very crucial election, because I will report to you which incumbents, which candidates, which new faces are willing to spend the time with a voter and answer hard questions. We need to do these things because, as Thomas Jefferson warned us a long time ago, more than 200 years ago, he wrote, "It should not be surprising if sometimes public officials do not heed the voice of the people and go about doing whatever they wish, using their power and authority to enrich themselves and those closely allied to them." And we see this happening all the time on Guam. All we have to do is look at Guam YTK, Guam Resource Recovery Partners, North Point Market, and all the other political hazard events that have taken place where politicians have linked hands with politically well-connected insiders and reached both hands into the pocketbooks of taxpayers. We have to stop that because they won't. We have the power to stop that because, as Ronald Reagan said, if you can't make them see the light, make them feel the heat. We have an election coming up, and the purpose of having an election every 2 years is that 2 years gives politicians enough time to make a good faith effort to commit and actually attempt to do the things they promised us they would do. And it's also a good chance for us to change out the government, because in the Declaration of Independence, and let me go back to that one real quick right here. Right here, my favorite line in the Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights," and this is the line that government and politicians hate, "governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." That's us, the people, the voters, the governed, the consent of the governed. "That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute a new government." And we do that every 2 years with our vote. We are making the transition from the 36th legislature to the 37th legislature, a new body of government. And hopefully it will be staffed primarily with public servants, people who feel a call to serve their fellow citizens instead of looking for a job and looking to support their politically well-connected donors. There's an old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, and it only works when we hire people with a spirit of public service who are going to look after all of us, not just a few of us. So if you are registered, and as we know, there are a lot of people out there that think they are registered to vote, but they aren't. I say that as a person who got almost 400 signatures on my petitions to run for office and had nearly 200 invalidated. So for those of you watching this video or this live stream, call Guam Election Commission or go online and verify if you are registered to vote, because I just heard on the radio today some guy who voted last election, but for some reason is not. When he went to check, he's very upset because even though he voted in the last election, he's not on the rolls to vote in this one. So make sure you're registered to vote, because your vote is your power. That is your instrument of control, the key to your fate, of your destiny, the destiny of your family and your children and grandchildren. And then make sure all your friends and relatives make the effort to verify whether or not they are registered to vote or not. And in a final act of citizenship, I encourage every one of you to download this list, call, prepare your questions, and write down the answers you get from these people. Don't try to remember them all. You know, there's an old saying out there, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullcrap. And the politicians among this group will try to do that. The public servants in this group will give you the truth to the best of their ability, and that matters, especially in these days. So we have a challenging times coming. We have hard times coming. You know it every time you go to buy food, every time you put gas in the car, every time you walk into a store and see the shelves half empty, every time you drive past a building where the store or business is now closed. And we can't count on politicians to protect all of us. We can only count on public servants. So do your part as a citizen to make sure that we elect those that have the strongest public service calling into the legislature and into ADLIP, because by God, we're going to need it this time. I'm Ken Leon-Guerrero, and that's my point of view.